Okay, so once you have purchased your 100% cotton fabric, you'll need to prepare your fabric. So the only time that we don't need to pre-shrink the fabric is if it is indicated on the label, the bolt label at the store. Otherwise, if it did not say pre-shrunk, then we have to assume that it's not pre-shrunk and we need to do that process. So as you can see, I have 2.5 yards of this black fabric, and I got a coupon from Joann's, so I'm going to take this to the washing machine and talk about how to wash it. Alright, so I just want to talk a little bit about why we wash the fabric before we make anything with it. And it has to do with the fact that cotton fabric is made from natural fibers, and unless the fabric bolt label specifically specifies that it has been pre-shrunk, you can assume that it has not been otherwise. And this is important because if you go to use this fabric on a project and you don't pre-shrink it, then after you wash it and put it through the dryer for the first time, the fabric is going to shrink. And this is problematic for sizing, so it's going to shrink like a size, or if you put a zipper in it, then the fabric is going to be really tight and pulling on the zipper that you put into your skirt or garment or whatever, and it's going to make it buckle and wave and not work very properly. Alright, since the garment is made of cotton, we're going to want to make sure that you wash it on the hottest setting on your washing machine, because if you remember or have taken Textiles 210, cotton and linen handle heat the best. They don't melt, and the heat will help them shrink, and also it will help eliminate wrinkles, especially in the dryer. So anyway, if you're going to wash it by itself, that's fine. Just be aware that, you know, if you buy fabric with, you know, a color like this, a dark color, just be mindful that it could possibly bleed into, you know, any other garment you wash with it. So just be mindful and careful about that. You know, if you buy a dark fabric and you want to combine it in a load with some other stuff, just make sure they're also dark and that you're not worried if they get some fabric dye in them. And then if your fabric is white or light, then don't put other fabric or apparel items that have darker colors in them, because then they could bleed into your white fabric. So just be mindful of all of that. I am just going to only wash this fabric. I've put some soap in my washing machine, and I'm going to run it on the full cycle on hot. And then let me show you about the drying process. Okay, once you have finished washing your fabric, it's totally normal if you see a lot of this happening, the ends getting frayed. That's fine, because we have to do a rip test and correct the, find the exact grain of the fabric. But anyway, you'll toss your fabric in your dryer if you have one, or, you know, if you need to go to a laundromat, that might be an option. But basically, you need to be doing high heat for cotton, and do it, you know, on the more dry setting. So I'm going to set mine. If you want to use dryer sheets, that's fine. It'll kind of help reduce some wrinkles, but it is not necessary, and you really shouldn't need any other product. And yeah, so go ahead and dry your fabric, and then I'm going to show you how to iron and fold it to get it ready for your project. Alright, yes, so your fabric is probably going to look something like this once you've pulled it out of the dryer. And that's okay, because I'm going to show you how to re-iron it, refold it, and trim off all those weird threads. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is just lay out the fabric and get rid of not the cat. Actually, I don't need to get rid of the cat. get rid of this stuff. Just trim it off. Do that. You don't need to trim this off. Just these long, stringy things. So go ahead and do that. Alright, so next we're going to find the grain, the straight grain, using the ripping test. So over here, from one selvage edge to the other, I'm just going to snip maybe about 1 inch in, and then, oh, that was very angled. I barely ripped and it already went off. So I'm gonna have to start in a little farther. How about another inch in? Let's see if that does me a little bit better. Oh, much better. Oh, but look at that. I still didn't make it all the way across. Yikes, this piece is quite a bit skewed. Okay, so now I'm going to start maybe another inch. See if I make it this time. I think I'm going to make it this time. Just barely. Alright, that there is the straightest grain on my piece. But of course I do need to, iron it because it's kind of wavy and wrinkly. So go ahead and get your iron out. Let's talk about ironing. Alright, so hopefully you have your iron ready and an ironing board. And you're going to want to put the iron on the cotton or high heat setting. And I recommend you use the steam as well. It's just going to help get the wrinkles out a little bit easier. Ouch. Please be careful. Don't be a dork like me. Steam is hot. That I've already got some more strings to cut off. It's okay. I'm not as worried about that anymore. Okay. So again, this edge that I ripped, this is going across from one selvage to the other selvage. That is the weft, which means the warp goes in this direction. But I can use this perfectly ripped at a 45-degree angle perpendicular line to match up my grain. So yes, we want to get the fabric so that it's free of wrinkles. My fabric's a little bit wider than this board. So I kind of have to shift it to one side and then I'll have to shift it to the other side. Slightly annoying, not the worst. Okay, so go ahead and do this to your entire piece of fabric, and then when you are done, I will show you how to fold it. Okay, so as you can see, I have completely ironed the entire piece of fabric. You know, selvages on the side, the lengthwise, the grain. So as you remember probably, I tore this end of the fabric. I did that tear test to find the true grain. And I noticed that it was a bit skewed. So my suggestion is if you have somebody around have them pull your fabric along the bias and stretch it. So what I mean is that somebody would stand at this corner up here, and then somebody would hold this corner, and then you would pull along the bias diagonal and just stretch out the fabric. Then you would do the same for the other side. Someone would grab this corner, someone would grab that corner, and you'd both pull and stretch the bias grain, and that should kind of help straighten it out a bit if you're still noticing that you think it might be a little bit skewed even after doing that rip test. So then, now that I've completely opened it up, ironed it flat, gotten all the wrinkles out, I'm going to now fold it using that ripped edge that I made. So, and then also you need to figure out which is your right side and your wrong side. So usually they look different. The wrong side, if you have a pattern, like if it's like flowers, the flowers are going to only be on the right side, and then it's not going to be, you might see them through the fabric, but it might be more white. For this piece, the only way I can really tell is that it looks like a twill pattern on this side, but when I look on this side, I don't see that pattern. So I know this is the wrong side. Make sure that you actually put the right sides on the inside when you fold it, so that it's only the wrong side on the outside. So I'm going to now refold it along this line. Okay, so I'm so concerned about matching up this ripped edge that I did that I actually went ahead and pinned it together. You don't have to go that far, but I'm kind of a perfectionist. Okay, so one thing I want to show you, one phenomenon, is after matching the ripped edges together, and if you try to fold it in half, you might notice that it's actually really difficult and not working. So I tried to match up the ripped edges together and then the selvages together. But the problem is that my fabric that I bought is so skewed that by matching this edge was not straight up and down on the fabric from one selvage to the other. So if I was trying to force this, this straight line to not be a straight line, if that makes sense. Which means that it will be impossible for me to match these edges up that are ripped and the selvages that came as is on the fabric. So you have two options. I know this can be a little bit complicated, so I would be okay if you still did the rip test, but just worried about only matching up the selvages, which means that then this ripped edge won't match up. That's fine. You can do that. It'll be a little off grain when you're placing your pieces and trying to cut them out, but I don't think it'll be too bad. Then if you really want to be picky about it, then you can do another method, which I will show you right now. I'll show you what it looks like when I don't match the selvages up and when I don't match up these edges, and I'll talk about them. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that even after I washed and ironed the entire thing, and I matched only the selvages, I didn't match also the ripped edge. So you can kind of see the ripped edge there and how, because it's skewed, that when the selvages match that these don't, the grain. But I know this is sort of a learning curve, and you kind of just have to work with a lot of fabric before you kind of really master finding the grain and processing your fabric. So I'm not going to be too picky about it. So for instance, I probably spent a good, I don't know, like 30 minutes wrestling with this fabric, trying to fold it as evenly as possible and get all the wrinkles out. But I think inevitably, I don't have a second person here to do the straightening the grain technique where we yank on the fabric in 2 different diagonals. And then the other thing is that I think it's still just a little bit wrinkled from washing. So honestly, I'm probably going to put some towels underneath the this fabric piece and just kind of iron it right on the floor, which I put the towel down between the carpeting and this fabric to protect the carpeting because you don't want it to melt. So yeah, I'm probably just going to do it, and I'll probably be able to iron out these wrinkles and while keeping the selvages matched together. So this is the first way you can do it. I'm not going to be too picky, like I said, but ideally this ripped line is the true grain. So now I'll show you what it looks like when I only match the grain and not the selvages, which is the most accurate way, but then you have to deal with the fabric being kind of funky, so I'm going to show you that. Okay, so now on this clip here, I only matched the ripped edge, which is the true grain, right? But I just want you to look, if you can, and see. So yes, as I was saying, look how badly skewed my fabric is. I'm actually quite mad now that I've matched up my ripped selvage edge, and I can see that only matching up that side, the top piece, you know, is there, and then the bottom piece is over here, so that's pretty significant gap. However, like I said, I did not actually have a chance to have somebody help me, you know, try to correct the grain. So I'm guessing, based on my experience with doing that technique, is that I can probably correct it about 50%, so I could make that gap much smaller. You probably can't get it 100% perfect, you know, on grain if the fabric is kind of made skewed on the loom itself, but you can get pretty close. So here's the deal. I would prefer everyone do this method, and of course you would be placing and matching your fabric grain perpendicularly to this edge. So you'd have some kind of grid ruler. You'd place pattern pieces, you know, going 45 degrees in that direction away from the grain, if you get what I'm saying. So remember, this is the weft, this isn't the grain. The grain runs that way. So, but anything that is perfectly perpendicular to this line, that is the grain. So the grain is most likely going to be something like this, an arrow like that, right? Because this fabric edge is going that direction, and this is the true grain. So just keep that in mind, you know. Like I said, a grid ruler can be really helpful, because if the line is completely straight with this edge, then any line on the ruler going this way is the grain. So there's enough room that you could place, you know, your patterns on the folded edge, and you just have to remember that if you need 2 of the same piece, don't place it over here, or you'll only get you'll get part of it cut like halfway off. So just remember that this is the edge where the double fabric ends, and nothing can go past that edge. So I would prefer you do this method, but like I said, I'm not going to be picky. But if you take the time now to prepare your fabric and do it the right way, I promise it's going to actually make the sewing easier, and you're going to have less problems than if you do it the other way. If you do it the other way, which is easier, you're doing the easy part up front, and then it might make it actually harder to work with later. You might have more problems with the fabric getting pinched and creating little tucks. So yeah, that is the compromise. The industry is definitely going to expect you to always make sure it's perfectly on grain as much as possible. So it's probably better you just practice it this way, even though I know it can be a lot of work, but it will save you a lot of trouble. And I think this is one of the harder parts of the project anyways, is just getting the fabric prepped and ready, because I mean, placing the pattern pieces on there, pinning them, cutting them out, that's kind of all like a piece of cake. Sewing them together, So do the hard work up front first, and then the rest will kind of be much better, I promise.